to Barnabas's Boneyard. If you haven't guessed already, I am your eponymous host, Barnabas. Welcome to another edition of the Boneyard. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing a brand new horror release called It Lives Inside. Before we get into the review, I do have to do my due diligence and say that we put a lot of work into this channel and all our social medias and the content in general. So if you could consider leaving a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing as well to catch all of our new videos and all the other content that we have coming down the pipeline. Of course, you don't have to do any of that, but if you like rave discussions, please do consider it. It would be greatly appreciated. But that's all I have to say about the spiel there. Okay, so first things first, It Lives Inside didn't really get a ton of marketing as far as I'm aware. Now, I don't have cable TV, so I don't know what kind of commercial spots it got on TV, so let me know. But I did see a little bit about it leading up to the release, mostly on horror-centric, like social media pages and news sites and stuff like that, which is not surprising considering the pretty small footprint of it. But it did debut in the top 10 of the domestic box office, at least at number 7, which is still pretty impressive considering. And I think it drew over $3 million in gross revenue worldwide over the weekend, which again is pretty good. I mean, for a movie like this, it's honestly not bad with like the little exposure it got, and considering the context of its entire concept, I think it's pretty admirable. So, what is the movie about? Well, it's a supernatural creature feature with one really defining twist, and that twist is that it's told from a uniquely Indian American perspective. So, the director Bishal Dutta is Indian, as well as the writer or co-writer, really, Ashish Mehta, and it stars a predominantly Indian cast as well. Now, I really don't know much of anything about Bollywood or any other like Indian filmmaking, so I was not previously aware of any of the principal cast members, or really most anybody in this movie besides, I think, the teacher Joyce, who I've maybe seen on like a TV show or something before. Betty Gabriel is her name. But pretty much everybody else I was unaware of before this, so I don't know what kind of status they have in Indian cinema, because I really don't think I've seen them in any Western products either. But either way, a predominantly Indian cast, and the story is about this Indian American second generation high school girl named Samita, who is portrayed by Megan Suri. Now, she is struggling with her cultural identity and her religion and, everything that goes along with that, which is a pretty typical struggle for a lot of second generation or direct immigrant children to the U.S. especially, right? And she lives in a primarily white suburban American town. So in a place like that, I mean, I'm not a person of color, but as an immigrant myself, I understand it can be daunting and intimidating being in a place that you feel like may not really welcome you, at least on the surface. So that is kind of her big character arc, is kind of overcoming that alienation and trying to fit in and understanding what it means to fit in, and learning to kind of accept her heritage and her background and everything else, right? So anyway, she suddenly sees like this other Indian girl named Tamira come to school, and she has this like weird jar with her that she carries around, and she looks all disheveled and is acting crazy, and Samita inadvertently unleashes this demonic, well, I don't want to say demonic because it's not really, but this evil entity from the jar. And it begins to essentially infest her life, and she has to overcome this thing and figure out how to get rid of it before it essentially kills her and, ruins her life. I mean, I'm guessing dying would ruin anybody's life. So you know what I mean, though, right? It's kind of a classic formula, right? Thing messes with a person, makes them seem crazy, destroys their life, looking to kill them, hurts the people around them. And this person has to like realize something about themselves and eventually defeat this thing, right? It's a pretty stock kind of supernatural horror setup, and I'll touch more on that later, but that's the gist of it. And as I already mentioned, this movie has that unique Indian American perspective, and the creature that is the central antagonist of the film is also Indian in nature, really Hindi in nature. It's the Pisasha. And I know I'm mispronouncing that. Even just saying the word right now, I feel like I fucked up the pronunciation. Pishacha, I think, is what it's called. But as far as I can tell, these are described, and I'm on the Wikipedia page right now, full disclosure, because there isn't that much information about these things online, at least not, on the first page of Google. But it's they're flesh-eating demons in dharmic religions, although on a different source, it was described that they shouldn't really be classified as demons technically because of some kind of tier, ranking in the kind of like Hindi version of hell. I'm not sure, okay? An Indian person, you can, if you know about this, you can please let me know what I'm saying wrong, or you can, tell the class about this entity. But that's how they're described on Wikipedia, which may or may not be wrong. They appear in Hindu and Buddhist mythologies. A Pisacha is a malevolent being that has often been referred to as the very manifestation of evil. And expanding on that from other articles and such, it kind of sounds like they're almost like an energy vampire. These things feed on negative energy, negative emotions. Once they have an apparent victim, they torment them to no end, driving them mad, ruining their, family and social structures, and just taking them to the brink, essentially, right? And once they've sucked all the juice out of them, essentially, they will destroy them, once they've had their fill. But that's the gist about the creature. I'm sure there's more to it. Obviously, it's very deeply rooted in the Mahabharata and other texts and such, but I'm not even going to dive down that rabbit hole. But that's essentially the gist of it. The movie does, of course, explain some of this, and more or less, it's essentially what I just said. So there's that. So it's definitely a unique creature concept for what is already a pretty unique horror film, at least here in the West. I don't know if this subject has been broached in any Indian cinema, if this creature has been portrayed before. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a ton of Indian horror in general. I know that there are some pretty popular ones on Netflix and such. I really have to dive into those because I haven't really seen many of them yet. But as far as I am personally aware, this is really the first big portrayal of this type of creature in like a Western horror film. So that is already pretty cool. The representation as far as that in like Indian culture here is definitely off the charts. I feel like people who will go to see this who are not Indian or Hindi or even Buddhist will learn quite a bit from this. I mean, I'm sure the portrayals of Indian culture here are maybe a little dressed up for Western audiences and for the sake of the movie. But as far as I can tell, they do a pretty good job representing. And I mean, it does come from an Indian director and Indian writing duo. So I expect that they probably would want to portray their culture and their religion accurately. So I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. But yeah, while we're talking about all that, I think the movie does do a pretty good job of representing the Indian culture and the Indian American culture. And by proxy, that whole theme of like second generation immigration and fitting in and things like that, as I alluded to. You know, I'm an immigrant and I know a lot of immigrants as well, and a lot of second generation immigrants and such. And it can definitely be a challenge to fit in, especially in, primarily white town and in a place where you don't know the language very well and where everybody kind of looks at you funny or whatever the case may be, right? So I think the movie touches on that fairly well. Samita, she is really trying to be this person that is accepted by the kids around her. She's trying to like be on social media, and she's into this white guy and everything like that, which, hey, it's totally fine. But in the context of the film, it's kind of touching on like she doesn't want to really accept her background and who she actually is. And like, it's like almost like she's ashamed of it, right? So her big character arc is sort of coming to terms with who she is and learning to accept it while also being able to fit in and be seen in kind of the same light and not as like an outsider. So even considering the fact that this is a supernatural monster movie where there's like kills and scares and stuff like that, I think the overall approach to that specific theme and her character arc regarding that is actually done pretty well. Obviously, the horror takes precedence over that a lot of the time, but it all essentially blends together because this creature is, like Hindi in origin and everything. So, she has to come to terms with that and seek help from the people that might actually know a thing or two about it, right? So I think the movie handles that fairly well. Also, the actual creature and the scares themselves are pretty solid, honestly. I like the way that Dutta and the filmmaking team approach the utilization of the monster in this one, the Pisacha, because, and I'm going to compare, I don't like comparing, but I have to compare because this movie has been living in my head rent free, but The Nun 2, man, the scares came like every 5 minutes. And yeah, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it felt like it. And they were extremely gimmicky. Valak was really in the limelight of this one, which I kind of understand because she's like the big drawing point of the Nun franchise at this point, right? But still, like, you could have done more to build some suspense with her or it. But in this film, I think the Pisacha is utilized pretty effectively because the filmmakers don't really put it in the spotlight as much. It's really kind of hidden away in the shadows in a lot of scenes, right, in the background or even off camera. And as the viewer, you kind of learn to anticipate it, right? But that anticipation builds and builds and builds until the time is right to actually finally like reveal it or give you something a little more substantial as far as like a scare or some type of reveal or whatever goes. So the scares are, and those like 10 scenes are spaced pretty decently apart as well. It's not just every like 5 minutes. There's actual room to breathe and develop some character and plot work, right? So I appreciated that. There could have been some maybe more intense scares and some maybe more creative things done with the scares, but I still think there was a good sense of building suspense and tension within those scenes that we do get. And the set design and the overall production design is also pretty good in setting up that creepiness factor in this movie. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed that aspect of it. The finale was also quite good. You know, you expect in the finale of a movie like this that they're going to go balls to the walls, show the monsters, going to be this big fight and everything, and maybe have some cool effects. And actually, I don't want to spoil too much, but there is some good practical effects work, primarily in the finale, which I did appreciate and enjoy. And I think the finale is overall pretty good. There is a, I guess, controversial writing decision in the finale, which my wife and I kind of debated over, and I won't get into it, of course, because this is supposed to be spoiler free. But if you know what I'm talking about, then hit me up, maybe privately, and we can discuss it. But yeah, so those are the big drawing points of the film for me. And well, I will also say the cinematography at times was pretty good. Sound design and everything was solid, but nothing extremely memorable in those departments. So yeah, and acting was also pretty solid. The star of the show, honestly, was Niru Bajwa, who played Purna, the mother of Samita. I think she did a great job as the kind of more traditional mother, you know, the traditional immigrant mother who expects a lot out of her daughter. And I think she did a great job. Betty Gabriel as the teacher, Joyce, was also good. And Vic Sahay as Samita's dad was also pretty solid. The teenage actors did an okay job, but I wanted a little bit more from them. So that's what I'll say about that. Now, the negative points about this movie, there's one really big one, and I kind of already alluded to it before, and it's that this movie is a bit formulaic, you know? And I'll say this much. If you've seen 2023's The Boogeyman from Rob Savage, you've kind of seen this movie. Not exactly, because obviously this movie gives you the story from a much different perspective than that like white American suburban teen that The Boogeyman and a lot of other movies do. But at its core, this movie is very similar to that, because again, it has this like supernatural monster that kind of lives in the dark and is afraid of the light and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, there's a protagonist who gets in its way, and then they seem like they're going crazy and they alienate themselves from like their family and friends, and everybody thinks they're like super paranoid. And, you know, of course, there's like this like build up where they have to realize something about themselves and then like overcome the monster in this like big explosive climactic battle at the end and everything like that. Oh, and of course there's like some kind of scholar or mentor figure or restricted library book or something like that they find information about this thing on or from like a person. You know, they do the necessary research needed to dispel it or whatever. I mean, even the Nun 2 did it, right? They go to this freaking library or something and figure out all they need to know about how to get rid of Valak in that instant, right? This movie does something very similar. So it's, like I said, it's a pretty generic type of story composition. This movie at least injects some personality and unique elements to that with the Indian American perspective and this different type of evil being. But when you break it down, even the evil being what it is, and rooted in the origins that it's rooted in, still becomes kind of like Rob Savage's The Boogeyman. You know, it's set up and executed in very much a same, well, not the same, but a similar way is what I'll say. So watching this movie unfold, even though you have like the scenes of the Hindi puja, which is ritual, like an annual ritual and everything like that, and seeing Samita's interactions with her immigrant parents and their expectations and her kind of rebellious nature against that and everything like that. Even though you're seeing all of this when you're watching the movie unfold, when you're watching the plot progress and everything, it still feels very much like a million other supernatural monster movies that you've seen before, right? So in that sense, I would say it's not completely original. And I have to say that because, I just have to be objective about it. The formula is there, it's present. It's safe. I mean, it works because I still enjoyed the film. It was still entertaining to me, but I'd be remiss not to point that out. So it is still a criticism. The movie still does work to a degree, even with that, because like I said, it's just a classic story composition, right? Especially for horror. And it works because it is what it is, right? Everybody likes to see a hero overcome something like negative about themselves or whatever, or come to this realization that kind of changes their life and destroy this evil thing and come out on top and all that, We like to see it because it makes us feel good about what we watched, about ourselves, etc. So I totally get it. And for a theatrical release that is going to show to a much wider audience than whatever niche horror project came out on Mubi or Arrow TV or some shit, right? This type of structure definitely appeals more to that wider audience, because a lot of people don't really need to see this art piece that has like themes about grief and you know what I'm talking about. Regardless, it's still a bit of a criticism for me. And like I said, some of the scares and everything could have been a little bit more creative and a little bit more intense, but I still like the movie overall. I think it's worth checking out, especially right now. There aren't really a ton of very appealing films out at the movie theaters. So, I mean, if you haven't seen anything, I would at least go check this one out. It's a good kind of like couples night out sort of horror movie to check out. And I enjoyed it overall. So I would give it a 3.5 out of 5. And of course, I do have a full written review of this film out on defactofilmreviews.com, which you can check out. I pretty much expanded on it way more in this video than I did over there, but I would still appreciate you giving that a click and a view and all that good stuff, just in case you decide you want to read it and support my written criticism as well. So I'll include a link to that in the description. But yeah, that's all I have to say about It Lives Inside. Decent flick. Go check it out if you got nothing better going on. Unfortunately, I just think this movie is going to homogenize with The Boogeyman and a ton of other supernatural monster movies like it in the future, and it will probably be forgotten about in a matter of weeks, sadly. But that's just the way it is. That's the nature of the business, and that's the nature of movies like this, and that's kind of why you want to be original as hell, like an Infinity Pool or a Mandy or a Psycho Gorman or whatever else, because then at least people will really remember shit like that over stuff like this, which is a little more stock. But hey, it is what it is, right? So that's gonna do it for this video, Gravers. As always, if you like the content, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Grave Discussions. Go to gravediscussions.net for all our articles, podcast episodes, and everything else you may want from our show. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, once again, please consider subscribing for more videos like this. But that's going to do it for me. I am hopefully going to watch No One Will Save You on Hulu pretty soon. So I'll either have like a video or a TikTok about that. But until then, I am Barnabas, And we'll see you right back here on the Boneyard.